The Valari were a quiet people. They lived on a beautiful world called Kethis Prime. Their planet had green forests, blue oceans, and mountains that touched the clouds. For 3,000 years, they had lived in peace. They made art. They wrote poems. They built tall towers of crystal and glass. They never made weapons, because they never needed them. The Valari looked like tall, thin beings with pale blue skin. They had 4 fingers on each hand, and large eyes that glowed softly in the dark. Their voices were gentle, like music. They believed that all life was precious, and that violence was the lowest form of thinking. Elder Counselor Tivan was one of their leaders. He was old, even by Valari standards. He had seen 200 seasons come and go. He had helped build great libraries and peaceful treaties with nearby worlds. He had never seen war. He did not even truly understand what war meant. Then the Korvax came. The Korvax were not like the Valari. They were conquerors. Their bodies were covered in thick gray scales. Their eyes were red and filled with hunger. They had claws instead of fingers and teeth that could bite through metal. For 1,000 years, they had traveled from world to world, taking whatever they wanted. They had destroyed over 50 species. They had enslaved hundreds more. They built their empire on fear and death. The Korvax fleet arrived at Kethis Prime on a cold morning. There were 900 warships. They blocked out the sun as they moved into orbit. Each ship was covered in weapons and armor. They looked like giant metal beasts floating in the sky. Tivan was in his home when the first message came. A young Valari ran to him with tears in her eyes. "Elder, you must come quickly," she said. "Something terrible is happening." Tivan followed her to the communications center. Hundreds of Valari had already gathered there. They were all looking at a large screen on the wall. On the screen was a face that made Tivan's blood turn cold. The Korvax commander was named Vorn. He was larger than the others of his kind. A long scar ran across his face, cutting through one of his red eyes. When he spoke, his voice was like rocks, grinding together. "People of Kethis Prime," Vorn said, "you now belong to the Korvax Empire. You have 30 days to surrender your world. Give us your resources. Give us your people for labor. Obey us. And some of you will live. Resist us, and you will all die. There is no third choice." The screen went dark. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the crying began. Valari fell to their knees, holding each other. Some screamed. Some simply stood in shock, unable to move. Tivan felt his hearts beating fast. The Valari had 2 hearts, and both of them were filled with fear. He looked around at his people. They were artists and poets. They were teachers and builders. They did not know how to fight. They had no weapons, no warships, no soldiers. "What do we do?" asked a young council member named Sela. Her voice was shaking. "We cannot fight them. We have nothing." Tivan walked slowly to the communication console. His hands were trembling, but he forced them to be still. He had to think. He had to find a way to save his people. "We cannot fight them," he agreed. "But perhaps someone else can." The other Valari looked at him with confusion. "What do you mean, Elder?" Sela asked. Tivan began pressing buttons on the console. "We will send a message, a plea for help. We will send it to every corner of the galaxy. Someone out there must have the power to help us. Someone must care enough to answer." The other council members looked at each other with doubt. They knew what Tivan did not want to say out loud. Most species in the galaxy were afraid of the Korvax. No one wanted to make enemies with such a powerful empire. Why would anyone risk their own people to save strangers? But they had no other choice. Tivan worked through the night. He wrote the message himself. He kept it simple and honest. There was no time for pride or dignity. He was begging, and he knew it. "We are the Valari of Kethis Prime. We are a peaceful people who have never harmed anyone. The Korvax Empire has come to destroy us. We have no weapons. We have no way to defend ourselves. Please, if anyone can hear this message, we beg you for help. We do not want to die. The message was sent on every frequency. It traveled through space at the speed of light. It bounced off satellites and relay stations. It spread across the galaxy like ripples in water. Days passed. The Valari waited and watched the sky. The Korvax ships hung in orbit, silent and patient. They knew the Valari could not escape. They knew no one would come to help. On the 5th day, Tivan received his first response. It was from a species called the Torvan. They expressed sympathy, but said they could not help. The Korvax were too strong. On the 7th day, the Mayori sent a similar message. They wished the Valari well, but would not risk war with the Korvax. On the 10th day, the Sethri simply said no. They did not even explain why. Tivan felt hope slipping away with each rejection. 15 species had received the message. 15 species had refused to help. The Valari were alone. Then, on the 12th day, something changed. A young technician named Velo came running into Tivan's office. His eyes were wide with something that looked like fear, mixed with excitement. "Elder, we have received a response," Velo said. "But it is strange. Very strange." Tivan stood up quickly. "What do you mean?" "Who responded?" Velo handed him a datapad. "A species from the far side of the galaxy. They call themselves humans. They come from a world called Earth." Tivan had never heard of humans or Earth. He looked at the response on the datapad. It was short. Just a few lines. "Message received. Help is coming. Hold on. Admiral Jake Morrison, United Earth Navy." Tivan read the message 3 times. He did not understand. Who were these humans? What was the United Earth Navy? And why would they help strangers from across the galaxy? "Elder," Velo said quietly, "I searched our records for information about this species. What I found is troubling. 8,000 light-years away, the planet Earth floated in the darkness of space. It was a small world, covered in blue oceans and green land. White clouds drifted across its surface. From far away, it looked peaceful and calm. But Earth was not a peaceful world. It was a world of storms and earthquakes. It was a world where the ground could open and swallow cities. It was a world where the weather could kill in minutes. The animals that lived there were hunters with sharp teeth and claws. Even the plants could be poison. The humans had evolved on this dangerous world. They were not the strongest animals on Earth. They were not the fastest. They did not have claws or fangs or armor. But they had something else. They had minds that could solve problems. They had hands that could build tools. And they had a spirit that refused to give up, no matter how hard things became. Over thousands of years, the humans had conquered their death world. They built cities and roads. They tamed the wild animals. They learned to control fire, electricity, and eventually, the atom itself. When their planet could no longer hold them, they reached out to the stars. The first human colony was built on Mars. Then they spread to the moons of Jupiter and Saturn. They built ships that could travel faster than light. They met other species in the galaxy and learned they were not alone. Most species were afraid of humans. They called Earth a death world and warned others to stay away. The gravity was too strong. The weather was too violent. The diseases were too deadly. No one understood how any intelligent species could survive there, let alone thrive. But the humans did not care what others thought. They built their own empire, not through conquest, but through trade and cooperation. They made friends with some species and enemies with others. They fought wars when they had to and made peace when they could. Now, in the year 2347, humanity was one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. Their fleet numbered over 500 warships. Their soldiers were trained from childhood in combat and strategy. Their scientists built weapons that could destroy entire planets. Admiral Jake Morrison had served in the United Earth Navy for 30 years. He was 52 years old, with gray hair and eyes the color of steel. He had fought in 3 wars and won them all. His men called him the Stone, because nothing seemed to shake him. Morrison was sitting in his office on the orbital station called Sentinel when Lieutenant Megan Torres brought him the message. Torres was young, only 25, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She was smart and efficient, but today her face was pale. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, handing him a datapad. Morrison read the message from the Valari. Then he read it again. His expression did not change, but Torres could see something shift behind his eyes. "How far is Kethis Prime?" he asked. 8,000 light-years, sir. At maximum warp, it would take about 3 weeks. Morrison looked at the tactical display on his wall. It showed the locations of all the major powers in the galaxy, including the Korvax Empire. "The Korvax," he said quietly. "I have read reports about them. They have destroyed over 50 species." "Yes, sir," Torres confirmed. "They have 900 ships at Kethis Prime. Our entire Third Fleet only has 47 vessels." Morrison stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see Earth hanging in the void, beautiful and blue. He thought about the Valari, a peaceful people facing total destruction. He thought about the Korvax, monsters who killed for profit and pleasure. "Get me high command," he said, "and start preparing every available ship for deployment." Torres hesitated. "Sir, the odds are very bad. Even if we bring every ship we have, we would still be outnumbered." Morrison turned to face her. For a moment, his stone face showed something else, something that looked like cold anger. "Lieutenant, let me tell you something about humans. We did not survive our death world by playing it safe. We did not conquer the stars by being afraid of bad odds. Someone out there is crying for help. They have no one else to turn to, and we are going to answer." The next 72 hours were chaos. Messages flew across the human territories. Ships were recalled from patrols and training exercises. Soldiers were pulled from leave and sent to staging areas. Supply ships loaded food, fuel, and ammunition. President Laura Chen addressed the United Earth Assembly in a special emergency session. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and an iron will. She had led humanity through a recession and a border war with the Torvan. Now she faced her greatest challenge yet. "We have received a plea for help from a species called the Valari," she said, her voice carrying across the Great Hall. "They are facing extinction at the hands of the Korvax Empire. Some will say this is not our problem. Some will say the risks are too great. But I ask you this: what kind of people would we be if we abandoned the innocent to die?" The debate was short. When the vote was called, it was unanimous. Humanity would go to war. Admiral Morrison was given command of the relief fleet. By the 3rd day, 112 warships had gathered at the staging point near Saturn. It was the largest military force humanity had assembled in 50 years. The flagship was called the Relentless. It was a carrier, 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and fighter bays. It could hold 2,000 crew members and 500 combat pilots. Commander Nathan Price was assigned as the tactical officer. Price was 38 years old, with brown hair and sharp green eyes. He had flown fighters for 15 years before moving to command positions. He was known for being calm, under pressure, and deadly in a fight. Captain Claire Matthews commanded the heavy cruiser Thunderbolt. She was 40 years old, with red hair and a face full of freckles. She had a reputation for being aggressive in battle and fiercely protective of her crew. On the morning of the 4th day, the fleet was ready. Morrison stood on the bridge of the Relentless, looking at the assembled ships on the main screen: cruisers, destroyers, frigates, and carriers. Each one crewed by men and women willing to die for strangers they had never met. "Open a channel to the fleet," Morrison ordered. "Communications." Officer Ryan Park nodded. "Channel open, Admiral." Morrison took a breath. "This is Admiral Morrison. In a few minutes, We will jump to warp and begin our journey to Kethis Prime. Many of you are wondering why we are doing this. Why are we risking our lives for a species we have never met? The answer is simple. Because it is the right thing to do. He paused, letting his words sink in. The Valari cannot fight. They cannot defend themselves. They have no one else to help them. If we do not go, they will die. All of them. Men, women, children, an entire civilization. Wiped out because no one was willing to stand up for them. On ships across the fleet, crew members stopped what they were doing to listen. The journey through warp space took 21 days. During that time, the human fleet prepared for war. On the Relentless, Commander Nathan Price ran battle drills every 6 hours. The pilots practiced attack formations in the simulators. The gunners calibrated their weapons. The engineers checked and rechecked every system. Price stood in the fighter bay, watching as his pilots climbed into their ships. The fighters were called Hawks. They were small, fast, and deadly. Each one could carry 4 missiles and 2 plasma cannons. In the hands of a skilled pilot, a Hawk could destroy ships 10 times its size. Lieutenant Derek Cole was one of the best pilots in the fleet. He was 26 years old, with blonde hair and a smile that never seemed to leave his face. He had grown up on a colony near Jupiter, where he learned to fly cargo ships at age 12. Now he flew fighters, and he was very good at it. "You ready for this?" Price asked him. Cole grinned. "Born ready, Commander. I have been waiting my whole life to show some aliens what we can do." Price nodded, but his face stayed serious. "This is not a game, Lieutenant. The Korvax have killed millions. They will not go down easy." "Good," Cole said. "Easy is boring." On the bridge of the Thunderbolt, Captain Claire Matthews studied the intelligence reports on the Korvax. Their ships were heavily armored, but slow. Their weapons were powerful, but took a long time to reload. Their tactics were simple. They overwhelmed enemies with numbers and firepower. Her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Sam Bradley, looked over her shoulder. "They have never lost a war," he said. "Every species they have fought has been destroyed or enslaved." Matthews smiled coldly. "They have never fought humans." Bradley frowned. "We are still outnumbered almost 9-1. Numbers are not everything," Matthews replied. "The Korvax fight the same way. Every time. They expect their enemies to run or surrender. They do not know how to handle someone who fights back hard." On Kethis Prime, the Valari watched the days pass with growing despair. 23 days had gone by since they sent their plea for help. Only 7 days remained. Before the Korvax deadline, Elder Counselor Tivan had not slept in a week. He spent his nights in the observation tower, staring at the stars. The Korvax ships hung in orbit like a ring of death around his world. Sometimes he could see their weapons flashing as they fired at asteroids for target practice. His people were preparing to die. Some families gathered together to share final meals. Some visited the temples to pray. Some simply sat in silence, waiting for the end. Young Sela found Tivan in the tower on the morning of the 24th day. "Elder, you must rest," she said gently. "You have not eaten in 2 days." Tivan shook his head. "I cannot rest. I keep thinking about that message from the humans. They said help was coming. But where are they?" Sela looked at the ground. Perhaps they changed their minds. Perhaps the distance was too far. Perhaps. She was interrupted by a loud alarm. Both of them looked up in surprise as lights began flashing across the tower. "What is happening?" Tivan demanded. A technician rushed in, his eyes wide with shock. Multiple contacts detected at the edge of the system. Over 100 ships, dropping out of warp. Tivan felt his heart stop. More enemies? Another fleet? Come to claim their world? He ran to the sensor display, his old legs carrying him faster than they had in years. The screen showed bright dots appearing in the darkness of space. 112 ships, arranged in a perfect formation. Those are not Korvax ships, the technician said. The design is completely different. Sir, I think they might be human. In orbit, the Korvax fleet detected the new arrivals. Commander Vorn was in his quarters when the report came. He walked slowly to the bridge, his heavy feet shaking the floor with each step. What is this? He growled, looking at the display. His tactical officer, a younger Korvax named Dreth, studied the readings. Unknown ships, Commander. 112 vessels. They match no species in our database. Vorn narrowed his red eyes. 112 against 900? They must be mad. Should we hail them? Dreth asked. Before Vorn could answer, his communication console lit up. Someone was already sending them a message. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the Relentless. Through the main view screen, he could see the Korvax fleet in the distance. 900 ships, arranged in a sphere around the planet. They looked confident. They looked strong. They looked like they had never been truly challenged. Channel open, Admiral, Ryan Park reported. Morrison stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice was hard as iron. Attention, Korvax fleet. This is Admiral Jake Morrison of the United Earth Navy. The Velari are under our protection. You will withdraw from this system immediately. If you do not, we will destroy you. The response came quickly. Vorn's scarred face appeared on the screen. His expression, a mix of confusion and anger. Human? I do not know your species, but I know that 100 ships cannot defeat 900. You are either very brave or very stupid. Morrison did not blink. We are neither. We are simply human. Vorn laughed, a harsh sound like rocks falling. Go home, little human. This world belongs to us now. Leave, or you will die with the Velari. Morrison turned to his tactical officer. Commander Price, status of the fleet? Price checked his screens. All ships report ready for battle, Admiral. Fighters are standing by for launch. Morrison looked back at Vorn's image on the screen. I will give you one chance, Korvax. Leave now. Take your ships and go back to your empire. We do not want war, but if you force us to fight, we will not hold back. Vorn's laughter grew louder. You threaten us? You are 9-1 against us. Your ships are small. Your numbers are weak. What could you possibly do to us? Morrison smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who had just found its prey. Let me show you. He cut the communication and turned to his crew. All hands to battle stations. Launch all fighters. Signal the fleet to assume attack formation. Delta 7. Across the fleet. Alarms began to sound. Pilots ran to their ships. Gunners powered up their weapons. Engineers prepared the engines for high-speed combat. On the Thunderbolt, Captain Matthews took her seat in the command chair. Weapons hot, shields to maximum. All batteries, prepare to fire on my command. In the fighter bay of the Relentless, Commander Price climbed into his Hawk. He had not flown combat missions in years, but he was not going to sit this one out. His hands moved automatically, running through the pre-flight checklist. Lieutenant Cole's voice came through the comm. Commander, you are flying with us? Someone has to keep you kids out of trouble. Price replied. All wings, form up on me. We launch in 60 seconds. On Kethys Prime, Tivan watched the human fleet spread out into a wide formation. The ships moved with perfect coordination, like a flock of birds acting as one mind. They were so much smaller than the Korvax vessels, so few in number. They cannot win, Sela whispered. There are too many Korvax. The Korvax had fought many battles. They had crushed fleets twice the size of this one. They had broken the spirits of species that had been warriors for thousands of years. They expected the humans to behave like every other enemy they had faced. They were wrong. The first wave of Hawks did not slow down when the Korvax opened fire. They did not scatter or retreat. Instead, they dove straight into the plasma fire, weaving and spinning through the deadly beams with impossible skill. Commander Nathan Price led the assault. His fingers danced across the controls as he guided his hawk through the storm of weapons fire. A plasma bolt passed so close to his cockpit that he could feel the heat through the hull. "Stay tight," he ordered through the comm. "Pick your targets. Do not waste your shots." Lieutenant Cole was on his right wing, laughing as he flew. "They are too slow, Commander. Their guns cannot track us." It was true. The Korvax weapons were designed for fighting large, slow targets. The human fighters were too small and too fast. For every shot that hit, 20 missed completely. The Hawks reached the Korvax formation and began to unleash their weapons. Missiles streaked through space, slamming into enemy hulls. Plasma cannons carved lines of fire across armored plates. Within the first 3 minutes, 6 Korvax ships were burning. On the bridge of his flagship, Commander Vorn watched in disbelief. His fleet was not supposed to take damage this quickly. His ships were not supposed to die this easily. "Concentrate fire on the small ships," he ordered. "Destroy their fighters." But the fighters were not alone. While the Hawks kept the Korvax gunners busy, the human cruisers moved into position. Captain Claire Matthews gripped the arms of her command chair as the Thunderbolt accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Around her, 12 other heavy cruisers flew in a tight wedge formation. "Distance to enemy flagship?" she asked. 40,000 kilometers and closing, Bradley reported. "All batteries. Lock onto the flagship. Fire on my mark." The Korvax flagship was the largest ship in their fleet. It was called the Conqueror, and it carried enough weapons to destroy a small moon. Commander Vorn stood on its bridge, confident that no enemy could touch him. He was wrong about that too. "Mark," Matthews said. 13 human cruisers fired at once. Beams of bright blue energy lanced across space, converging on a single point. The Conqueror's shields flashed as they tried to absorb the attack. The shields held. Barely. "Again," Matthews ordered. The cruisers fired a second volley. Then a third. Then a fourth. Each time, the shields grew weaker. Warning lights began flashing across the Conqueror's bridge. "Return fire," Vorn shouted. "Destroy those ships." The Korvax weapons were powerful, but slow. By the time they fired, the human cruisers had already moved to new positions. The plasma bolts passed through empty space. Admiral Morrison watched the battle from the Relentless, directing the fleet like a master chess player. He saw patterns that others missed. He anticipated enemy movements before they happened. "Group 3, pull back and regroup," he ordered. "Group 5, move to intercept those destroyers on the left flank. Carrier Wing 2, launch your reserves." The human fleet moved like water, flowing around the Korvax formation. They never stayed in one place long enough to be targeted. They struck from unexpected angles. They turned the enemy's numbers into a weakness. In the midst of the chaos, Commander Price led his fighters deeper into the heart of the Korvax fleet. They were hunting for a specific target: the engine sections of the largest ships. "There," Price said, pointing at a Korvax battlecruiser. "See those exhaust ports? That is where their fuel lines connect. Hit them there, and the whole ship goes up." Cole nodded and armed his missiles. "On your lead, Commander." They dove together, screaming toward the battlecruiser at full speed. Korvax point defense guns tried to track them, but they were too fast. Price fired first, his missiles slamming into the exposed engine section. Cole fired a second later, his shots hitting the same spot. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the battlecruiser's engines exploded in a ball of white fire. The explosion tore the ship in half, sending debris flying in all directions. "That is 4 for me," Cole reported, pulling his hawk away from the wreckage. "Stop counting," Price replied. "We have a lot more to kill." On the Conqueror, Commander Vorn felt something he had not felt in a long time: fear. His fleet was being torn apart by an enemy 1/10 their size. His ships were dying faster than he could count them. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "They are supposed to be weak. They are supposed to run." None of his officers had an answer. The humans did not run. They did not even slow down. Every time the Korvax thought they had gained an advantage, the humans found a way to turn it against them. They were relentless. They were unstoppable. They were exactly what the galaxy had feared they would be. On Kethis Prime, Elder Counselor Tivan watched the battle with growing amazement. The sky above his world was filled with explosions and fire. Korvax ships were falling, breaking apart, burning up as they fell toward the planet's surface. "They are winning," Sela whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Tivan could not speak. He had never seen anything like this. The humans fought like demons, like forces of nature. They seemed to have no fear, no hesitation. They threw themselves at the Korvax with a fury that was almost frightening. "Is this what it means to be a Deathworlder?" he wondered. "Is this what survival on such a terrible planet creates?" Back in space, the battle reached its turning point. Captain Matthews saw her chance, and took it. "All cruisers, full power to weapons. Target the Conqueror's shield generators." The human cruisers fired everything they had. Beams, missiles, plasma bolts, all focused on a single point. The Conqueror's shields flickered, flashed, and finally collapsed. "Now," Matthews said. "Hit the bridge." The next volley struck the Conqueror directly. The massive ship's upper section disappeared in a flash of light. When the explosion cleared, the bridge was gone. Commander Vorn was dead. Without their flagship, without their commander, the Korvax fleet began to panic. Ships that had held formation now started to scatter. Captains tried to flee, to save themselves and their crews. The humans gave them no mercy. "All ships, pursue and destroy," Admiral Morrison ordered. "Do not let them escape. They need to know that if they threaten the innocent, there will be no safety for them anywhere." The human fleet chased the fleeing Korvax across the system. They hunted down every ship that tried to run. They showed the same ruthlessness that the Korvax had shown to their victims for 1,000 years. By the time it was over, 643 Korvax ships had been destroyed or disabled. The remaining 257 had fled into warp space, running as fast as their engines could carry them. The human fleet had lost 17 ships. Every crew member who died was recorded. Every sacrifice was remembered. Price flew his hawk back to the Relentless, his body exhausted but his spirit burning with victory. As he climbed out of his cockpit, Cole was waiting for him. "Final count," Cole said. "We got 12. Confirmed kills. All of them." Price nodded slowly. "Good work. All of you." Cole's smile faded a little. "We lost people today, Commander. Good people." "I know," Price said. "That is the cost of war. We pay it so others do not have to." On the bridge of the Relentless, Admiral Morrison stood before the main view screen. The Korvax fleet was gone. The planet below was safe. The Valari would live. "Send a message to the surface," he said quietly. "Tell them the battle is over. Tell the morning after the battle was quiet on Kethis Prime. The sky was clear for the first time in weeks. The Korvax ships were gone, replaced by the smaller, sleeker vessels of the human fleet. They hung in orbit, like guardian angels, watching over the world they had saved. Elder Counselor Tivan had not slept. He had spent the night coordinating with his people, making sure everyone was safe, counting the survivors. By some miracle, no Valari had died during the battle. The humans had protected them completely. Now he stood at the main landing field, waiting. A human shuttle was coming down from orbit. The first meeting between their two species was about to happen. Thousands of Valari had gathered to watch. They stood in silent rows, their glowing eyes fixed on the sky. Some were afraid. The humans were Deathworlders. After all, they had just destroyed a fleet that had terrified the galaxy for 1,000 years. What would such beings be like in person? Tivan shared some of that fear. But he also felt something else. Gratitude. curiosity, and a deep, powerful hope. The shuttle appeared as a bright dot in the sky, growing larger as it descended. It was a simple craft, gray and functional, with the letters UN painted on the side. The engines hummed as it slowed, kicking up dust as it touched down on the landing pad. For a moment, nothing happened. The crowd held its breath. Then the shuttle's ramp lowered with a soft hiss, and the humans stepped out. Admiral Jake Morrison came first. He was tall, much taller than the Valari, with broad shoulders and a strong jaw. His gray hair was cut short, and his eyes were the color of storm clouds. He moved with purpose, each step confident and controlled. Behind him came Commander Nathan Price and Captain Claire Matthews. Price was younger, with an alert expression and watchful eyes. Matthews had bright red hair that caught the sunlight, and she walked with the easy grace of a fighter. The three humans stopped at the bottom of the ramp and looked around at the gathered Valari. For a long moment, the two species simply stared at each other. Tivan stepped forward. His hearts were beating fast, but he kept his voice steady. "I am Elder Counselor Tivan. On behalf of all Valari, I welcome you to our world." Roan signed, "All Valari." Roan signed, "All Valari." Morrison nodded and gave a small bow. "Admiral Jake Morrison, United Earth Navy. It is an honor to meet you, Counselor." Tivan noticed something in the Admiral's eyes. Despite everything this man had done, everything he could do, there was no arrogance. No hunger for power, just a calm, steady presence. "You saved us," Tivan said. "You came from the other side of the galaxy to fight for people you have never met. I do not have words to express what that means to us." Morrison smiled gently. "You sent out a cry for help," we answered. "That is what we do." One of the young Valari in the crowd, a child no more than 10 seasons old, pushed through the adults and ran toward the humans. Her mother tried to grab her, but she was too fast. She stopped directly in front of Morrison and looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Are you really a Deathworlder?" she asked. The crowd gasped. Some of the adults looked horrified, but Morrison just knelt down so he was at the child's eye level. "Yes, I am," he said. "Does that scare you?" The child thought about it for a moment. Then she shook her head. "No. You saved my family. Why would I be scared of you?" Morrison's smile grew warmer. "You are a brave one. What is your name?" Kira," the child said proudly. "Well, Kira, I hope we can be friends. Humans may come from a dangerous world, but we are not dangerous to those we care about." The child's mother finally reached them, apologizing over and over. But Tivan raised his hand to stop her. "Let the child stay," he said. "She has shown more wisdom than many adults. This human risked everything to save us. He deserves our trust, not our fear." Over the next several days, the humans and Valari worked together. Engineers from the fleet helped repair damage caused by debris from the battle. Medical teams treated the few Valari who had been injured. Scientists began sharing knowledge between the two species. Commander Price spent most of his time with the Valari Defense Council, such as it was. They had never needed defense before, but that had to change now. "The Korvax will come back," Price told them. "Not soon, but eventually. They do not forget their enemies. You need to be able to protect yourselves." Sela looked worried. "We are not warriors. We do not know how to fight." "Then we will teach you," Price said. "Not how to be like us. You do not need to become Deathworlders. But you can learn to defend your homes. You can learn to stand up for yourselves." Captain Matthews led the effort to set up orbital defense platforms. These were automated stations that could detect incoming ships and fire on them if they proved hostile. They were not powerful enough to stop a full invasion, but they could buy time. "The galaxy has noticed what happened here," Matthews told Tivan one evening. "The Korvax have never been beaten this badly. Other species are talking. Some are afraid of us, but some are starting to see us differently. How so? Tivan asked. Matthews looked up at the stars. For a long time, the galaxy saw humans as dangerous animals, beasts that were best avoided. But you saw something different. You saw that we could be protectors. You saw that we could use our strength to help others. She turned to face him. You gave us a chance to be heroes, Counselor. Not conquerors or destroyers, but defenders of the weak. That matters more than you know. Tivan thought about this for a long time. He had sent out his message in desperation, expecting nothing but rejection. Instead, he had found something unexpected. He had found allies, friends, maybe even family. You did not have to come, he said quietly. No one would have blamed you for staying safe. Matthews shook her head. Yes, we did have to come. That is who we are. Humans have done terrible things in our history. We have wars and crimes and cruelty, just like any species. But we also have this. When someone needs help, there is always someone willing to answer. On the last day before the fleet departed, Admiral Morrison met with Tivan one final time. They stood on a hill overlooking the capital city, watching the sun set over the crystal towers. We will leave a small force here to help with your defense, Morrison said. And we will be back to check on you regularly. The Valari are part of our family now. Tivan blinked his glowing eyes. Family? That is how we think of it, Morrison explained. When you stand with us, when you trust us with your safety, you become part of something larger. We protect our own. Always. Tivan felt tears forming in his eyes. He had led his people through the darkest time in their history. He had watched them face extinction and survive. And now, because of these strange, fierce, wonderful beings from a death world, they had a future. Thank you, he said, his voice breaking. For everything. Morrison placed a hand on his shoulder. It was a gesture of friendship, simple and genuine. You are welcome, he said. Take care of your people, Counselor. And remember, you are not alone anymore. Whatever comes next, you will face it with friends at your side. The human shuttle lifted off an hour later, carrying Morrison and his officers back to the Rella. The news of the Battle of Kethis Prime spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within days, every species in known space had heard the story. The Korvax Empire, the most feared conquerors in the galaxy, had been beaten by a fleet 1/10 their size, and the ones who beat them were humans. On the Korvax homeworld, the survivors of the battle were executed for their failure. The Emperor himself watched as they died, his red eyes burning with rage. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Korvax had learned the taste of defeat. Find out everything about these humans, the Emperor ordered. I want to know their weaknesses. I want to know how to destroy them. His advisors bowed and hurried to obey, but deep in their hearts, they were afraid. They had seen the battle reports. They had watched the footage of human fighters tearing through Korvax ships, like knives through paper. These Deathworlders were unlike anything they had ever faced. On the other side of the galaxy, other species reacted differently. The Torvan, who had refused to help the Valari, sent a diplomatic message to Earth, expressing their respect. The Mayori opened trade negotiations for the first time. Even the secretive Sethri reached out, curious about the species that had achieved the impossible. President Laura Chen received ambassadors from 12 different species in the month following the battle. They all wanted the same thing: an alliance with humanity. They had seen what the Deathworlders could do, and they wanted that power on their side. Chen was careful with her answers. She did not want humanity to become the galaxy's mercenaries, fighting other people's wars for payment. But she also knew that the universe was changing. The old order, where the strong preyed on the weak without consequence, was breaking down. We will stand with those who share our values, she told the ambassadors. Those who believe in peace and cooperation. Those who protect the innocent and stand up to bullies. If you believe in those things, we can be friends. If you do not, Stay out of our way. On Earth, the heroes of Kethis Prime returned to cheering crowds. Admiral Morrison was promoted to Fleet Admiral, the highest rank in the Navy. Commander Price was given command of his own cruiser. Captain Matthews received the Medal of Valor, the most honored award for bravery in combat. But the celebrations were bittersweet. 17 ships had been lost. Over 2,000 men and women had died. Their names were carved into a new memorial in Geneva, so that future generations would remember their sacrifice. Lieutenant Derek Cole visited the memorial on a quiet morning, 3 months after the battle. He stood before the long wall of names, reading each one slowly. Some of them had been his friends. Some had been strangers. All of them had been heroes. Was it worth it? Asked a voice behind him. Cole turned to see Commander Price approaching. The older man looked tired, his shoulders heavy with the weight of command. I think so, Cole said. We saved an entire species, millions of lives that would have been lost. If we had not gone, the Valari would be dead or enslaved. Price nodded slowly. That is what I keep telling myself. But it does not make the losses easier. They stood together in silence for a while, honoring the dead. What happens now? Cole asked eventually. Price looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, the Korvax were licking their wounds and planning revenge. Somewhere out there, other species were suffering under the boots of conquerors. Somewhere out there, another plea for help would go out into the void. Now we keep going, Price said. We train harder. We build more ships. We make sure that the next time someone cries for help, we are ready to answer. Cole smiled slightly. Sounds like a lot of work. It is, Price agreed. But that is what it means to be human. We do not run from hard work. We do not hide from danger. We face it head on, and we do what needs to be done. On Kethis Prime, Elder Counselor Tivan watched his world slowly heal. The crystal towers that had been damaged in the battle were being rebuilt. New defense platforms orbited the planet, their sensors always watching for threats. A small group of human advisors worked with Valari volunteers, teaching them the basics of self-defense. Tivan had changed in the months since the battle. He no longer spent his nights in fear. He walked through the streets of his city with his head held high, proud of his people and grateful for their allies. Young Kira, the child who had spoken to Admiral Morrison, followed Tivan everywhere now. She had decided she wanted to be a diplomat when she grew up, building bridges between the Valari and other species. Do you think the humans will come back to visit? She asked one day. Tivan smiled. I am certain of it. They said we are family now. Humans do not abandon their family. As if to prove his words true, a message arrived the next day. It was from Commander Price, now Captain Price, of the cruiser Defiant. Elder Counselor, I wanted to let you know that we will be passing through your system next month on a patrol mission. If it is acceptable, I would like to stop by and see how you are doing. My crew could use a reminder of why we do what we do. Tivan replied immediately, inviting the humans to stay as long as they liked. His people would prepare a celebration. It would be a chance to show their gratitude and strengthen the bonds between their species. The galaxy continued to turn. Wars were fought and treaties were signed. Empires rose and fell. Species were born and died. But the story of the Battle of Kethis Prime was never forgotten. It became a legend, told in 1,000 languages on 1,000 worlds. The story of a peaceful people who faced extinction and cried out for help. The story of the Deathworlders, who answered their call. The story of how war could be used not for conquest, but for protection. Other species began to reach out to the Valari, curious about these humans who had saved them. The Valari told their story with pride, sharing what they had learned about their strange, fierce, wonderful friends. They come from a world of death, Tivan would explain. Every day of their existence was a battle for survival. They learned to fight because they had no choice. But they also learned something else. They learned that strength means nothing if it is not used to protect the weak. Years passed. The alliance between Earth and the Valari grew stronger. Other species joined. forming a coalition dedicated to mutual protection and cooperation. The Korvax Empire watched from the shadows, their plans for revenge slowly taking shape. But that is a story for another time. On the anniversary of the battle, 10 years after the human fleet first arrived at Kethis Prime, Tivan stood before a great crowd. Behind him was a statue, 30 meters tall, showing a human soldier standing beside a Valari elder. Their hands were clasped in friendship. 10 years ago, we sent a message into the void, Tivan said. We begged for help, expecting nothing but silence. Instead, we received something miraculous. We received warriors who crossed the galaxy to fight for strangers. We received heroes who risked everything for people they had never met. He paused, looking up at the statue. The humans taught us many things. They taught us that strength can be used for good. They taught us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the will to act in spite of it. And they taught us the most important lesson of all. His voice grew stronger. They taught us that no one is truly alone. No matter how dark the night, no matter how terrible the enemy, there is always someone willing to stand with you. There is always hope. In the crowd, a group of human visitors stood among the Valari. Captain Price was there, his hair now gray at the temples. Lieutenant Cole, now Commander Cole, stood beside him. They listened to Tivan's speech with solemn expressions. We are Deathworlders, Price murmured. Born on a planet that tried to kill us every day. But we did not just learn to survive. We learned to protect. We learned to care. Cole nodded. And we always will. Above them, the stars shone bright and clear. Somewhere in that vast darkness, other species were suffering. Other pleas for help were going out. And somewhere, a human fleet was preparing to answer. Because that is what humanity does. They begged for help, and the Deathworlders delivered war. Not for conquest, not for glory, but for something far more important, for those who could not fight for themselves. The end. Endless. The fleet would stay for another week, making sure everything was secure. Then, they would return home to Earth. Tivan watched until the shuttle disappeared into the clouds. Around him, his people were beginning to rebuild their lives. Children were playing in the streets again. Artists were painting new murals on the walls of the city. Poets were writing songs about the day the Deathworlders came to save them. The universe was still a dangerous place. The Korvax would return someday. Other threats would emerge. But the Valari were no longer alone. They had allies now. They had hope. And somewhere across the stars, the humans were watching over them. They are free. A few moments later, a response came from Elder Counselor Tivan. His voice was shaking, filled with tears and gratitude. Thank you, Tivan said. Thank you. We do not know how to repay you. We do not know what to say. Morrison smiled gently. You do not owe us anything, Counselor. We did what was right. That is all. But why? Tivan asked, the same question he had asked before. Why did you come? Why did you fight for us? Morrison looked out at the stars. Because someone had to. And because we could. The Battle of Kethis Prime was over. The Deathworlders had won. Tivan shook his head slowly. I do not know. There is something about these humans. Something different. The first wave of human fighters launched from their carriers. 500 hawks streaked toward the Korvax fleet, their engines leaving trails of blue fire in the void. Commander Vorn watched them come. He was not worried. He had crushed larger fleets than this. He had destroyed species that thought they could fight back. All ships, open fire, he ordered. Show these humans what happens to those who challenge the Korvax. 900 ships turned their weapons toward the approaching humans. The space between the fleets lit up with plasma, fire, and missiles. The battle for Kethis Prime had begun. We are humans, Morrison continued. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We survived because we fought back. We survived because we never gave up. And we survived because we stood together, even when the odds were against us. His voice grew harder. The Korvax think they can do whatever they want. They think no one will stop them. They are wrong. Today, we show the galaxy what happens when you threaten the innocent. Today, we remind everyone what the Deathworlders are capable of. He raised his fist. For Earth, for humanity, and for those who cannot fight for themselves. All ships jump to warp. The fleet lit up with blue light as the warp engines engaged. One by one, the ships stretched and vanished into the void, leaving nothing but empty space behind. The Deathworlders were coming. He showed Tivan another screen. It contained data about the planet Earth and its people. Tivan read the information slowly. With each line, his eyes grew wider. The humans came from a world that other species called a death world. Their planet was filled with danger. Earthquakes, storms, floods, volcanoes, and animals that killed for food. The humans had not just survived on this world. They had conquered it. But what scared Tivan was the last line of the report. Humans are the most dangerous species in the known galaxy. They are strong, fast, and intelligent. But what makes them truly frightening is their capacity for violence. Do not make enemies with the humans. Tivan set down the datapad. His hands were shaking again. But this time, it was not just from fear. For the first time in 12 days, he felt something else. Hope.